The night he left me was the night I swore I would never be the same again. I stood there in our marble kitchen, the cold floor biting through my bare feet, as he packed his suitcase without even looking at me. My husband, Daniel Hale, the man I gave my 20s, my heart and my dreams to, zipped up his leather bag like he was closing the coffin lid on our marriage. His last words before walking out the door were a knife I'll never forget. "She's younger, Claire. Fresher. You'll survive." And then the slam of the door. I remember staring at my reflection in the glass walls of our Manhattan penthouse. My face looked older than it should have at 35, drained from years of holding up a man who never saw me as his equal. He left me for a woman barely out of college. And that night, with the city lights glittering like cruel stars below me, I whispered to myself, "You'll regret this, Daniel. You'll regret it when I come back richer, stronger, untouchable." But what I didn't know then was that betrayal is never that simple. It's not just a wound. It's gasoline waiting for fire. And when I struck my first match, I had no idea how big the blaze would grow. My name is Claire Smith Hale. Once, I was just a lawyer's daughter from Boston, raised to believe that marrying well was the highest kind of success. I played my part. I became Mrs. Daniel Hale, wife to one of New York's most promising hedge fund stars. I thought that was enough, that being the woman beside the man was power. But the night he left me for her was the night I realized I'd been living as a shadow. And shadows have a way of becoming dangerous when they learn how to walk in the light. It didn't happen overnight. I had nothing when Daniel walked out, nothing but the alimony he tried to choke down to pennies and a closet full of gowns I couldn't wear without feeling sick. He thought I'd crawl back, humiliated, forgotten. But instead, I started building. First with one risky investment that everyone told me would fail. Then another. I began pulling strings I had never dared to pull while I was his wife. Contacts. Old favors. Hidden talents I had buried under years of being his silent supporter. Every step I took forward, I could hear his voice mocking me in my head. "You'll survive." No. Survival wasn't enough. I wanted more. And yet, even as my empire began to grow brick by brick, I couldn't escape the memories. The younger woman, Sophie, her smug smile when she paraded herself at the gala weeks after he left me. His arm wrapped around her waist, his hand resting on her in the exact spot he used to rest it on me. The whispers that followed me in every room. Poor Claire! She lost him to a girl half her age. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break glass. But instead I smiled. Smiling was my weapon. Quiet was my disguise. And money, my money, would be my sword. 'Cause you see, betrayal taught me something no MBA or boardroom ever could. Taught me patience. Revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. Builds in silence, brick by brick, until the walls close in around the person who once thought they destroyed you. And I was building. Faster than Daniel could have imagined. The first time I saw him again was 3 years later. By then, I wasn't just Daniel's ex-wife. I was the woman who bought the skyscraper his firm rented its offices in. And when his secretary called me by mistake, thinking I was still his assistant, I smiled so wide it hurt. But here's the part that still twists my gut every time I think about it. The night I decided to finally face him, to step back into his world not as the abandoned wife but as the woman who owned half the city. I discovered a secret that changed everything. A secret about Daniel. A secret about Sophie. And it was darker than I ever imagined. High voltage cliffhanger reached. Do you want me to continue directly into Chapter 2 where the secret gets revealed, or pause here so you can command when to resume? You said. Change the names used here. Write for me said. Got it. I'll rewrite Chapter 1 with fresh, powerful names that carry the same weight but feel distinct. Here's the updated version with changed names. The night he left me was the night I swore I would never be the same again. I stood there in our marble kitchen, the cold floor biting through my bare feet, as he packed his suitcase without even looking at me. My husband, Alexander Grant, the man I gave my 20s, my heart and my dreams to, zipped up his leather bag like he was closing the coffin lid on our marriage. His last words before walking out the door were a knife I'll never forget. "She's younger, Emily. Fresher. You'll survive." And then the slam of the door. I remember staring at my reflection in the glass walls of our Manhattan penthouse. My face looked older than it should have at 35, drained from years of holding up a man who never saw me as his equal. He left me for a woman barely out of college. And that night, with the city lights glittering like cruel stars below me, I whispered to myself, "You'll regret this, Alexander. You'll regret it when I come back richer, stronger, untouchable." But what I didn't know then was that betrayal is never that simple. It's not just a wound. It's gasoline waiting for fire. And when I struck my first match, I had no idea how big the blaze would grow. My name is Emily Carter Grant. Once, I was just a lawyer's daughter from Boston, raised to believe that marrying well was the highest kind of success. I played my part. I became Mrs. Alexander Grant, wife to one of New York's most promising hedge fund stars. I thought that was enough, that being the woman beside the man was power. But the night he left me for her was the night I realized I'd been living as a shadow. And shadows have a way of becoming dangerous when they learn how to walk in the light. It didn't happen overnight. I had nothing when Alexander walked out, nothing but the alimony he tried to choke down to pennies and a closet full of gowns I couldn't wear without feeling sick. He thought I'd crawl back, humiliated, forgotten. But instead, I started building. First with one risky investment that everyone told me would fail. Then another. I began pulling strings I had never dared to pull while I was his wife. Contacts. Old favors. Hidden talents I had buried under years of being his silent supporter. Every step I took forward, I could hear his voice mocking me in my head. "You'll survive." No. Survival wasn't enough. I wanted more. And yet, even as my empire began to grow brick by brick, I couldn't escape the memories. The younger woman, Vanessa, her smug smile when she paraded herself at the gala weeks after he left me. His arm wrapped around her waist, his hand resting on her in the exact spot he used to rest it on me. The whispers that followed me in every room. "Poor Emily! She lost him to a girl half her age." I wanted to scream. I wanted to break glass. But instead I smiled. Smiling was my weapon. Quiet was my disguise. And money, my money, would be my sword. 'Cause you see, betrayal taught me something no MBA or boardroom ever could. Taught me patience. Revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. Builds in silence, brick by brick, until the walls close in around the person who once thought they destroyed you. And I was building. Faster than Alexander could have imagined. The first time I saw him again was 3 years later. By then, I wasn't just Alexander's ex-wife. I was the woman who bought the skyscraper his firm rented its offices in. And when his secretary called me by mistake, thinking I was still his assistant, I smiled so wide it hurt. But here's the part that still twists my gut every time I think about it. The night I decided to finally face him, to step back into his world not as the abandoned wife but as the woman who owned half the city. I discovered a secret that changed everything. A secret about Alexander. A secret about Vanessa. And it was darker than I ever imagined. The night I chose to face Alexander wasn't about closure. It wasn't about showing him what he lost. No, it was about control. For 3 years, I'd built myself into something he could never have imagined. Emily Carter Grant, CEO of Carter Global Holdings, a name whispered in Wall Street circles with a mix of awe and fear. But nothing could have prepared me for what I uncovered that night. The gala was at the Astoria Grand, one of those old money hotels dripping with chandeliers and champagne. I arrived in a gown that hugged me like armor, sleek black with diamonds glittering at my neck. I knew people would stare. That was the point. I wanted Alexander to feel it in his bones when he saw me, what power really looked like. And he did see me. His eyes locked onto mine across the room, that same smug grin twitching at his lips. But beside him stood Vanessa, glowing in white silk, one hand resting lightly over her stomach. That's when I noticed it. The bump. Pregnant. I felt the air vanish from my lungs. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was lineage. Legacy. He was going to give her the family he always told me we weren't ready for. I forced my glass of champagne steady, though my knuckles were white around the stem. I couldn't let them see me break. But before I could turn away, something else caught my attention. The way Alexander's jaw tightened every time Vanessa laughed too loudly. The way his hand gripped her wrist a little too firm when she tried to wander off. The whispers around me weren't just about their glow. They were about something darker. His firm's in trouble. Too much leverage. Vanessa's father cut ties. Pieces of a puzzle started clicking in my head. I left the ballroom early, slipping away into the quiet of the hotel's library lounge. My heart was pounding, not from jealousy but from recognition. Alexander wasn't untouchable anymore. He was bleeding financially. And Vanessa wasn't just some arm candy, she was a pawn. A pawn in a game he thought he could control. That's when I made the call. "Logan, it's me," I whispered into my phone. Logan Pierce, my trusted advisor, the only man I allowed into my inner circle. "I want every file on Grant Capital. Debt, investors, shell accounts. Everything. If there's blood in the water, I'll find it." And I did. Days later, Logan laid the papers across my desk in my Park Avenue office. What I saw made my stomach twist. Alexander had been hiding losses for years, covering them up with fake numbers and risky trades. Worse, Vanessa's pregnancy wasn't a happy accident. It was strategy. A ploy to keep her father's billions tied to his sinking ship. I should have felt triumphant. This was the leverage I dreamed of. Chance to bring him down completely. But staring at those numbers, at the hollow empire he'd built, I felt something I didn't expect: pity. "Emily," Logan said carefully, watching my expression. "This is your chance. You can crush him." I leaned back, closing my eyes. For all my billions, I couldn't protect myself from one thought echoing in my mind. Was I becoming worse than him? But then I saw it, the headlines flashing in my imagination. The whispers turning in my favor. Alexander exposed. The man who left me for a younger woman brought to his knees, not by scandal, not by divorce, but by me. And I knew what I had to do. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Vanessa's father. The man who once toasted Alexander as his future son-in-law of fortune. When he answered, his voice sharp and suspicious, I smiled to myself and said only one thing. "Mr. Sinclair, we need to talk. It's about your daughter's fiancé." The silence on the other end of the line stretched, thick as smoke. Then came the clipped reply. "Name the place." We met the following evening at the Monarch Club, one of those rooftop lounges where billionaires trade secrets over martinis. Richard Sinclair was exactly as I remembered. Silver hair, tailored navy suit, a man who wore his wealth like a weapon. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You said it was about Alexander," he began, eyes narrowing across the candlelit table. "If this is some bitter ex-wife vendetta." I cut him off. "If it were just personal, I wouldn't be here. This is business. And it concerns your daughter." That got his attention. I slid the folder across the table, the one Logan had compiled with every dirty number from Grant Capital. Richard's fingers tapped against the leather before he opened it. He read in silence, only breaking to glance up at me with that calculating stare of his. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold enough to frost the rim of his glass. "He's drowning. And he's using Vanessa to keep afloat," I said softly. "The baby? Convenient timing. He thinks if he ties her to him, he ties you to him too. Your money. Your name. Your empire." Richard shut the folder. And what do you want in return, Miss Grant? There it was, the old man's poker face, already measuring the cost of betraying the man his daughter loved. I don't want your money, I said. I have plenty of my own. What I want is your cooperation. When Alexander falls, and he will, I want you standing on my side of the battlefield. For a moment, Richard studied me like I was another deal to be dissected. Then, slowly, a smile crept across his lips. You remind me of myself when I was your age, he said. Dangerous, ruthless, impatient. We shook hands, sealing a silent pact that night. Alexander thought Vanessa was his golden ticket, but in truth, she had just become his Achilles heel. Still, when I left the Monarch Club and stepped into the humid night air, a knot tightened in my chest. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt unsettled. I thought about Vanessa, barely 23, glowing with naive love, carrying a child she didn't know was already a pawn in a war. Was I really going to use her the way Alexander did? The thought haunted me, but my resolve hardened when I returned to my office and found Logan waiting. His expression was grim. What is it? I asked. He dropped another file on my desk. It's not just financial fraud anymore, Emily. There's something else. I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, grainy, taken in secret. Alexander in a dimly lit room, exchanging envelopes with a man I recognized instantly. Victor Calderon. A name that made my stomach twist. Calderon wasn't just another investor. He was a known fixer. Ties to offshore accounts, political bribes, even whispered connections to organized crime. Alexander's in deep, Logan said. And if you move against him now, you won't just expose fraud. You'll uncover this, and Calderon doesn't forgive exposure. I stared at the photos, my heart hammering. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was dangerous. Deadly dangerous. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I had buried for years. Was I prepared to risk everything, even my life, for the sake of destroying him? Because one thing was certain, once I stepped into Calderon's world, there would be no way back. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, those grainy photos of Alexander with Victor Calderon burned against the inside of my eyelids. I knew Calderon's reputation, deals sealed in back rooms, rivals who disappeared, fortunes made and destroyed with a single whispered order. For years, I had thought Alexander's betrayal was personal. Now I realized it was poisonous. He hadn't just ruined our marriage. He was playing in waters so dark they could swallow anyone connected to him whole. By morning, I'd made my choice. If Alexander wanted to tie himself to Calderon, then I would cut the rope myself. Logan leaned against the edge of my desk, watching as I poured black coffee into a crystal glass. Emily, he said carefully, if we push too hard, Calderon won't hesitate to push back. This isn't just business anymore. This is blood. I sipped slowly, steadying my hand. Then we don't push. We outsmart. We make Alexander believe the walls are closing in, and when he runs for cover, we'll be there to light the match. Started small. Whispers placed in the right ears, subtle enough to feel like coincidence. I had contacts in the press, and with one quiet dinner at Le Jardin, I fed them just enough. Rumors of irregularities at Grant Capital, murmurs of desperate loans. The story didn't explode, but it simmered. Just loud enough to make Alexander sweat. And it worked. 2 weeks later, I attended a charity auction uptown, another glittering cage where the city's wealthiest paraded their power. Alexander was there, of course, Vanessa on his arm, her belly now unmistakable beneath a blush gown. But for the first time in years, he didn't look untouchable. He looked cornered. His tie was crooked. His smile strained. He drank too much. When he finally approached me, glass in hand, his voice was a low growl. You think you can play these games with me, Emily? His eyes darted around the room, checking who was watching. I know it's you. The whispers, the stories, don't think I don't know. I tilted my head, smiling politely. Alexander, I don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps the market is just correcting itself. His jaw clenched. His hand shook as he set down the glass. Then he leaned in so close I could smell the alcohol on his breath. You have no idea who you're messing with. Calderon doesn't tolerate betrayal. The name slipped from his lips like a warning, but it was too late. I already knew. I placed a gentle hand on his chest, as though I were still the dutiful wife I once was. My smile never faltered. Oh, Alexander, I whispered sweetly. It isn't Calderon I'm worried about. For a moment, he froze, staring into my eyes as if searching for the girl he used to control. But she was gone. All that was left was the woman who owned the building he was standing in, the woman whose empire was rising while his rotted from the inside out. I walked away, leaving him trembling in the middle of the auction floor. But my victory was short-lived. 'Cause later that night, as my car pulled up to my penthouse, a black SUV blocked the driveway. Two men stepped out, faces hard, movements sharp. One of them opened the door for me, not as a courtesy, but as a command. Ms. Grant, he said, his voice flat. Mr. Calderon would like a word. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face calm. This was it. The line I couldn't uncross. And as I slid into that black SUV, the city lights fading behind me, one thought cut through the haze of fear. I wanted revenge. But revenge was about to demand a price I hadn't counted on. The SUV glided through the city like a silent shark, tinted windows hiding me from the world I had fought so hard to conquer. My heart was a drum in my chest, but I kept my chin high, my breathing steady. Calderon wanted to intimidate me. He'd have to try harder than two hired shadows and leather seats. We pulled into an underground garage beneath a glass tower I didn't recognize. The doors opened, and one of the men gestured for me to step out. The elevator ride was wordless, tension hanging heavy in the air. When the doors slid open, I was led into a room more like a private museum than an office. Persian rugs, Renaissance paintings, a wall of glass looking over the city. And there he was, Victor Calderon, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, silver cufflinks catching the light, a glass of red wine in his hand. He didn't rise to greet me. He didn't have to. Power radiated off him like heat. Emily Carter Grant, he said, his voice low, smooth, and dangerous. I've been hearing your name quite a lot lately. I forced a polite smile. I didn't realize I'd made it onto your radar, Mr. Calderon. He studied me for a moment, eyes sharp as knives. You've been disturbing Alexander. And when my associates are disturbed, I take notice. I didn't flinch. Alexander disturbed himself. All I've done is let the truth breathe. His lips curved into a slow smile. Bold. Dangerous, but bold. You remind me of myself once upon a time. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Then he leaned forward, setting his glass down with deliberate care. Tell me, Emily, do you want him destroyed? Or do you just want him to suffer? Question struck me like a match in dry wood. I could almost taste the temptation in the air. But I also knew this wasn't generosity, it was a test. I want him to lose everything he thinks makes him untouchable, I said evenly. His money, his name, his control. Calderon chuckled softly, shaking his head. Spoken like a true predator. He stood, finally closing the space between us. His cologne was expensive, sharp, intoxicating. But predators have to be careful. Sometimes when you cut down a man like Alexander, the pieces fall in unpredictable places. I held his gaze. Then I'll make sure I'm holding the pieces. For the first time, his smile looked genuine. He extended his hand. I took it, though every instinct screamed against it. His grip was firm, lingering, sealing something I wasn't sure I wanted sealed. When the meeting ended and I stepped back into the night, I felt both powerful and tainted, as though I'd shaken hands with the devil himself. But while I was binding myself to danger, something else was happening in Alexander's world. Vanessa. She was sitting alone in the Grant townhouse nursery, staring at the crib that had just been delivered, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. For the first time, she saw Alexander not as the charming man who had swept her into his world, but as the man who came home late, drank too much, snapped too quickly. The man who whispered furiously on the phone when he thought she was asleep. And that night, she picked up his jacket from the sofa to hang it, and an envelope slipped out of the inside pocket. She frowned, picking it up. Cash. Thick stacks of it. And a name scrawled on the outside in black ink. Calderon. Her blood ran cold. She didn't know it yet, but Vanessa had just cracked open the first seam in Alexander's carefully woven mask. And if she pulled at that thread, the whole empire might unravel, faster than even I could make it. The next morning, I sat in my office, sunlight bouncing off the steel skyline outside my windows. Calderon's words still echoed in my head. Do you want him destroyed? Or do you just want him to suffer? I had shaken his hand, but the truth was I didn't trust him. Not fully. Calderon didn't help people, he positioned them. He used them. And now I had to make sure I wasn't walking into a trap. Logan leaned against my desk, watching me review the documents Calderon's men had sent over. Emily, this is a gift-wrapped grenade, he said bluntly. Fake accounts, offshore holdings, shell companies, it's enough to sink Alexander and everyone tied to him. But if you use this, you'll be aligning yourself with Calderon. Permanently. I set the papers down, staring at the city below. Alexander left me for a younger woman and thought I'd just fade away. He underestimated me once. He won't get that chance again. Logan didn't smile. He knew what I was really saying. I was ready to light the match. But even as I planned my next move, trouble was brewing in Alexander's own home. Vanessa sat in the nursery again, clutching the envelope she had found in Alexander's jacket. She hadn't told him she'd seen it. Not yet. But the name Calderon scratched at her like nails under her skin. She wasn't naive. She knew enough about the whispers in Manhattan's elite circles to recognize danger when it stared back at her in bold ink. That night, when Alexander finally stumbled in, his tie loose, his voice sharp, Vanessa forced herself to stay calm. "You're working too hard," she said gently, her hand brushing her swollen belly. "The baby." "Don't start," he snapped, pouring himself a drink. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements restless. She bit her lip, fighting back tears. She wanted to believe this was stress, not who he really was. But then his phone buzzed on the counter. She froze when she saw the name flash across the screen. Victor Calderon. Alexander grabbed the phone before she could react, but it was too late. She had seen. And he knew it. "Stay out of things you don't understand, Vanessa," he hissed, his hand gripping her arm tighter than he should have. "Do you hear me?" She nodded quickly, but inside something broke. Fear, yes, but also resolve. Because for the first time, Vanessa realized she wasn't safe. Not her. Not the baby. And in that moment, a dangerous thought began to form. She couldn't trust Alexander. But maybe she could trust me. Back in my office, Logan's phone rang. He frowned, then handed it to me. "It's her. Vanessa." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. Then I answered, my voice calm. "Vanessa." There was a pause on the other end, the faint sound of her unsteady breathing. Then her trembling voice came through. "Emily, we need to meet. Please. It's about Alexander." I chose the meeting place carefully. Not a hotel, not a restaurant, too many eyes, too many ears. Instead, I picked a quiet corner booth at the Greenhouse Cafe, a place tucked away on the Lower East Side where the city's elite never bothered to step foot. Neutral ground. Safe. When Vanessa walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She wasn't glowing anymore. Her hair was pulled back hastily, dark circles carved under her eyes, her silk dress hanging looser despite the swell of her belly. She looked scared. And in her fear, I saw a reflection of the woman I used to be. She slid into the booth across from me, her hands trembling as she held her water glass. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I leaned back, keeping my voice even. "You asked for me, Vanessa. That must mean things aren't as perfect as they seem in the tabloids." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. "I thought I knew him. I thought," she shook her head, struggling. "But he's different. He's angry all the time. Secretive. And I found," she stopped herself, glancing around as if the walls had ears. "Cash," I finished for her, my eyes steady on hers. "And a name. Calderon." Her breath caught. "You know." "I know enough," I said softly. "Enough to tell you that Alexander isn't just a cheating husband or a stressed-out businessman. He's tied to things that will bury him. And anyone standing too close." Vanessa pressed a hand to her stomach, her lips trembling. "I can't let him drag my baby into this." For a moment, I felt something unexpected, pity. She was young, yes. Naive, yes. But she was also trapped, just like I once was. "You came to me for a reason," I said. "What do you want, Vanessa?" Her eyes darted up to meet mine, filled with desperation. "I want out. I want safety. For me, for my child. But I can't do it alone." I studied her carefully. Part of me screamed that this was the opportunity one needed. With Vanessa on my side, I could bring Alexander to his knees faster than I ever imagined. But another part, the quieter, human part, wondered if I was about to drag her into something even darker. Before I could answer, Vanessa's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down, and I saw the name light up the screen. Alexander. Her face drained of color. She silenced the call quickly, but her hands were shaking so badly the glass nearly slipped from her grip. "Does he know you're here?" I asked sharply. She shook her head. "No. But he's been watching me more lately. Controlling where I go, who I see." I think her voice cracked. "I think he suspects something." I leaned forward, my voice low and deliberate. "Then you have a choice, Vanessa. Stay with him and risk everything. Or stand with me and help me destroy him before he destroys you." Her eyes flickered. With fear, but beneath it I caught a spark. A spark of something I recognized all too well, survival. She swallowed hard, then whispered, "Tell me what to do." And just as the words left her lips, a shadow loomed at the cafe's entrance. Alexander, standing in the doorway. His eyes locked on us. Cafe door swung shut behind him, the little bell jingling like a death knell. Alexander Grant. Perfect suit, perfect hair, the kind of polished smile that fooled everyone in the room, everyone except me, and judging by the way Vanessa's face drained of color, her too. "Vanessa," he said smoothly, ignoring me entirely. "There you are. I've been looking for you." Her voice cracked. I just needed some fresh air." He slid into the booth beside her, caging her in. His hand covered hers on the table, but it wasn't affection, it was possession. His eyes finally turned to me, sharp as broken glass. "Emily," he said, smiling like this was nothing more than a coincidence. What an unexpected surprise. Running into my ex-wife and my fiancé in the same place. What are the odds? I met his gaze, unflinching. "New York's a small city, Alexander. Or maybe you just can't resist following me." His smile tightened, but he kept up the act for Vanessa's sake, or maybe for the curious barista who was openly watching us from behind the counter. He leaned back, his arm draping around Vanessa like she was a trophy on display. "You've been busy, Emily," he said. "Making waves, buying buildings, stirring up whispers. Impressive." His tone shifted, lower, venomous. "But dangerous." Vanessa's hand trembled under his, and I saw it, the flicker of realization in her eyes. She wasn't the adored young wife anymore. She was leverage. And Alexander was reminding both of us who he thought held the strings. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Careful, Alexander. You sound nervous. And men who are nervous make mistakes. For a second, the mask slipped. His jaw clenched, his eyes darkened, and I knew I had struck a nerve. Then, just as quickly, the smile returned. Come on, Vanessa, he said lightly, standing and tugging her hand. Let's get you home. You shouldn't be out stressing yourself with unpleasant company. Vanessa hesitated. Just for a heartbeat. Her eyes flicked to me, wide, pleading, almost begging me to intervene. But before I could, Alexander's grip tightened and he pulled her up with him. Goodbye, Emily, he said, voice like ice. Try not to get in over your head. And just like that, they were gone. I sat there, the untouched coffee cooling in front of me, fury burning in my chest. I had almost reached her. Almost pulled her into my circle. But Alexander wasn't stupid. He'd seen the crack forming in Vanessa's loyalty. And now he would tighten his grip until she either broke or suffocated. Logan slid into the booth moments later, his eyes scanning the door. I saw him leave. You okay? I nodded stiffly, though my hands curled into fists. He knows. He's watching her. Logan lowered his voice. Then we need to move faster. If Vanessa's caught in the middle when this explodes, she won't survive it. And neither might you. I turned my gaze to the window, watching the city move on as if it hadn't just witnessed the quiet start of a war. Was I ready to burn everything, to save a woman who once took my place? My phone buzzed on the table. An unknown number. I answered cautiously, and a familiar low voice rasped on the other end. Emily, this is Calderon. I hear Alexander is losing control of his little fiancé. Do you want me to help with that? Help with that. Calderon's words slithered through the phone like smoke. I gripped the receiver tighter, forcing my voice calm. Vanessa is not your concern. He chuckled, low and mocking. Everything connected to Alexander is my concern. And if the girl is a liability, I clean liabilities. That's how this game is played. My stomach twisted. I had known Calderon was ruthless, but hearing the threat spelled out so plainly was something else entirely. You touch her, I said coldly, and we're done. There was a pause, long enough to make my pulse spike. Then Calderon's voice softened, almost playful. You're protective of her. Interesting. Very well, Emily. For now. But don't forget, you shook my hand. That means we're in this together. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my reflection in the black glass of my office window. For the first time, I wondered if I had invited a monster into my war. Meanwhile, Vanessa's world was closing in like a tightening fist. Alexander had all but locked her inside the townhouse. Security cameras at every corner, guards outside under the guise of protection. He controlled her phone, her appointments, even the nursery deliveries. You're stressed, he told her one night, his voice falsely gentle as he brushed her hair back. The city isn't good for you right now. Stay inside. Rest. Focus on the baby. But she knew it wasn't about her health. It was about control. That night, after he finally passed out in his study with a half-empty decanter, Vanessa crept downstairs. Her bare feet padded softly across the marble as she slipped into his office. She had memorized the password he typed into his laptop, careless, drunk, and now her hands trembled as she entered it. Files opened. Numbers, accounts, names. And there it was again. Calderon. Payments marked in coded language, transfers to offshore banks. Her stomach churned. This wasn't just business. This was criminal. And the man she thought she loved was dragging her and her unborn child straight into hell. Tears blurred her vision, but she copied what she could onto a flash drive she had hidden in her pocket. And then, the office light snapped on. Couldn't sleep? Alexander's voice was low, icy calm. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with a predator's patience. Or were you looking for something? Her throat closed. The flash drive felt like fire in her palm. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Vanessa." "But curiosity," his smile curled sharp and cruel, "can be dangerous." Back in my office, Logan stormed in with a folder. "Emily, you need to see this. Someone inside Grant Capital is leaking information. Not to us, to the press. Big outlets. If this goes public before we control it, Alexander won't just go down. He'll drag everyone with him." I froze. My mind raced. There was only one explanation: Vanessa. And if Alexander had caught her, she was in more danger than she could imagine. The news broke at dawn. Grant Capital under federal investigation. The headlines hit every major outlet before Alexander even opened his eyes. Fraud. Offshore laundering. Suspicious ties to shell companies. The empire he built on lies was crumbling, and for once it wasn't me pulling the strings. It was Vanessa. I knew it the second I saw the leaked files splashed across the business networks. She had gone behind him, taken the evidence, and handed it off. Maybe out of desperation. Maybe out of survival. Either way, she had just painted a target on her back. By midday, my phone rang again. "Calderon. You see what your little friend has done," he hissed. "This wasn't the plan, Emily. Now the feds are sniffing around my accounts, my people. You think I'll let that stand?" My heart pounded. "She's pregnant, Calderon. She's not your enemy. Alexander is." But his silence told me the truth. I had lost control of him. And that terrified me more than Alexander ever had. That night, I made my move. I drove straight to the Grant townhouse, Logan in tow, the city buzzing with rumors as reporters swarmed the gates. Somehow, I slipped inside through the service entrance, the halls eerily quiet. And then I heard it. Raised voices from the study. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Alexander's voice, sharp as a whip. "You've ruined me, Vanessa. Ruined me." Her sobs cut through the air. "I did it for our child. I couldn't let you drag us into this." A crash. Glass shattering. My stomach twisted. I pushed the door open without hesitation. Alexander spun toward me, wild-eyed, his tie undone, sweat dripping down his temple. Vanessa cowered in the corner, clutching her belly, tears streaming down her face. And for the first time, I saw him not as the man who once left me broken in our kitchen, but as what he truly was, a pathetic, desperate fraud clawing at the last pieces of power slipping through his fingers. "Emily," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "Of course. This is your doing." I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the marble. "No, Alexander. This is yours. You left me for her. You thought I was finished. But I built myself back, brick by brick, while you built an empire of sand. And now the tide's come in." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You think you've won? Calderon will destroy you. He'll destroy all of us before he lets this go public." As if summoned, my phone buzzed. Calderon's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I looked Alexander dead in the eye. "Calderon's already finished," I said. "I made sure of it." His face blanched. Because what he didn't know was that I had played both of them. While Calderon fed me Alexander's dirt, I fed the feds Calderon's. Offshore laundering, bribes, his entire shadow empire laid bare. By the time the investigation spread, it wouldn't just be Alexander behind bars, it would be Calderon too. "You'll go down with me," Alexander snarled, stepping closer. I held his gaze, unflinching. "No. You'll go down alone." Logan stepped into the doorway then, phone in hand. "FBI's downstairs." Alexander froze. Vanessa let out a sob of relief. And me? I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. The agents stormed in moments later, reading Alexander his rights as he raged, spit flying, veins bulging. They dragged him out in handcuffs, the cameras outside flashing like fireworks. The great Alexander Grant brought to his knees, not by scandal, not by chance, but by me. When the chaos finally cleared, I turned to Vanessa. She was trembling, clutching her belly, her face pale. "You're safe now," I said softly. She shook her head. "No one's safe. Not with men like him. Not with men like Calderon." I reached out, steadying her hand. "Then maybe it's time men like them stop running the world." Her eyes met mine, and in that moment I saw its strength. Fragile but real. The storm outside raged on, reporters shouting, sirens blaring, but inside I finally felt something close to peace. Alexander was finished. Calderon was falling. And me? I had become exactly what I promised that night he left me. Not just a survivor. Conqueror.